Welcome to Construction Genius. My guest is Nick Papadopoulos, the CEO of EOS Group, and we're going to talk today about how to flawlessly implement technology in your construction company. Nick is going to outline a 4-step process that you must go through when you are seeking to implement technology into your company. And we're also going to discuss the 5 benefits of effective technology implementation and usage. Our conversations revolves around the challenges that construction companies have with historical data management. Nick likens that data to gold, and he laments the fact that construction companies just throw that gold away many times because they don't manage their data well. So we're going to talk about that as well. I know you're going to find this interview extremely helpful. Nick is very clear in the way that he describes the uses of technology, and because I'm not a technical expert, I promise you we will not dive deep into technical weeds, but we will give you a very, very effective strategic approach that you can use to implement technology into your construction company. Enjoy my interview today with Nick. If you like this interview, share it with other people, give us a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts, and thank you for listening. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. All right, Nick, thank you for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I want to give the audience a heads up. We have a dry topic. It's historical data management, but Nick has a very interesting way of approaching it, and it's a vital topic for your construction company. Nick, the way you look at it is you say that contractors produce gold and they throw it away. What do you mean by that?
They do. Well, every contractor out there is generating data, lots and lots of data through various operational tools. And when they're done with the task of that particular tool, that data tends to live inside the tool, and it doesn't get socialized, and it doesn't, it isn't leveraged by others in the organization. And so that data remains somewhat static and isolated. It's in its own little bubble. And how does that get collected and shared amongst the rest of the organization so that others who don't have the experience of the person creating the data might leverage the data to make good decisions?
Okay, so let's talk about that first, just so that we're clear on terms. When you say data is generated, what do you mean?
So you have a tool, whether it is an Excel spreadsheet or an application or a measurement tool that is generating information, and that data is a byproduct of that effort. That tool is responsible to help you put it together, compile it, calculate it, extend it, shape it, do whatever you're going to do with it. So you have data that thing is generating, and now where do you go with that beyond just getting the answer?
Okay, so in other words, you've got, let's say, guys and gals in the field who are inputting data into this particular tool, and that data is, as you say, static and isolated. It's not being, you use the word socialized,
sure,
and then leveraged. Sure. So what do you exactly do you mean by socialized?
So socialization is a broad term, and I use it in the context of sharing that data with others who might need that data to make good decisions. How does that get conveyed to them? And if it's captured inside of a proprietary tool, and it's a tool that is maybe limited to a few people, or it's so complex that somebody needs 6 months to get good at it, that captured data then doesn't make its way outside of that specialist tool. And when it doesn't make it outside of that specialist tool, someone else who might need that data to make a decision or make the case or defend themselves, they don't have access to that data. So guess what? They reinvent it. And they reinvent it either by guessing, by making it up, the scientific wild ass guess, right? Now they spend their time trying to chase down the data that might be out there, or reinvent the data rather than having it readily available and moving on and making a quick decision.
What do you think is worse, reinventing or chasing down the data?
Well, certainly chasing down data takes a lot longer, right? So a wag and a swag is something you can put together in seconds, right? So how much should that be? I don't know. Pull it out of thin air and there's your answer. You'll find that oftentimes we talk to clients and they spend weeks per person every year just looking for data. There's a ton of studies around this concept of how much time people spend just looking for information. And it's amazing. Microsoft's got some studies, Google's got some studies. There are huge numbers that most people don't realize how much effort is spent just looking for information.
Okay, so then tell me, in a construction company, in your experience, in which departments do the data seekers tend to predominate? Who's spending the most time looking for data?
So it depends, right? So our specialty is in the pre-construction space. And so I can speak to that, with some level of confidence. Early on in a pursuit, when you're out there trying to sell yourself and get work in the door, oftentimes you represent yourself as a cost expert, right? So the architect is the design expert, the contractor is the cost and execution expert. And so as you wear that hat, you then set an expectation for others such that I am the person that knows these numbers. Okay, smart guy. So now you're in a room with the owner and the architect, and they're kicking around ideas. And the owner says, hey, what if we use this kind of an exterior system on the building versus this other kind? How much would that cost me? Now, either you have the experience of 25 years or whatever it is, having done this enough to know how to answer that question with confidence, or you do what most people do and you say, we'll have to get back to you. And that's not what you're representing. You're representing this expertise. And you're saying, I'm here at the table because I know these numbers. And without the historical data, you don't have the numbers. And our memory escapes us. It may be just me, but our memory fades over time. And the numbers that you think you remember aren't necessarily the right numbers anymore. And a lot of people get in a room and sit around a table and they all remember the same project and they all remember different numbers about the same project. So now you have multiple versions of the truth. So now you can imagine the confusion that occurs through that whole progression of lack of facts, lack of data, and leaning on memory to get there.
So let me ask you this. Why do you think it is that contractors struggle with historical data management?
Oh, I think it's the classic problem of trying to implement tools that solve short-term solutions that deal with isolated workflows or isolated steps in the process, but don't approach it from a holistic approach, a sort of a knowledge management approach. They solve a problem, and then when that problem is solved, they go on to the next problem.
So let me just stop you there, just real quick. Sure. Give me an example of what you're talking about when they say they solve an isolated problem. Give me an example of that.
Great question, right? So let's say what I do is I build schools.
Right.
And I've been doing that for the last 25, 50 years. When I produce a budget for a school and I go to hours and days and weeks preparing that budget, what happens to that budget when I'm done presenting that budget, right? Let's say I get the award and I build it. Let's say I don't get the award and I lose it. That effort of preparing that budget is incredibly valuable. It's worth thousands and thousands of dollars.
At least,
right? And so if you don't do something with that information and it just sort of vanishes at the end of that effort, 2 months later, when the next school arrives, what do? You start over again. Well, if you do this enough, you start to see patterns in data. You start to see patterns in what are driving factors. The structural system is a really big driving factor, or the number of students per gross square foot is an important metric that I really have to understand, because that tells me about student density, and it tells me about maybe, when I look at a new design and some designer has really provided way too many students for the given space, if I have the experience and if I have the data to support me, I might be able to defend this and present my case to the owner and say, you're not going to have a happy school here. You're going to jam too many kids into this space. You really either need to dial up the space, add a wing, add a floor, whatever it is, or dial back the number of students, because historically we've seen this in this range between this and this. And so you're coming up with these ideas that aren't really making a lot of sense.
It's really interesting because what I'm hearing here is a couple of things. Number one, if you're good at managing data, it makes your life easier, because once someone has done what you just described in terms of putting a number together for the school project,
yeah,
that effort, that data that they produce is it's something that combines both the plan itself and then their experience. There's so much value in that.
Yeah. That's the gold. That's the gold that I'm referring to. That's the gold,
yeah.
That's the gold, right? And if you don't look at it as valuable, you just discard it and you start over again. And it's just like you're reinventing the wheel. You're just starting the same grind over and over again and not leveraging that experience. And when you scale up the construction company, you scale up that process and you repeat that over and over and over again. And it's a highly inefficient process. But what you're losing is the reference data behind all that experience, so that you can use it to make a good decision tomorrow.
So it's interesting because if you're good at managing the data, from what I'm hearing, it makes your life easier. It makes you more credible in front of your clients.
Of course.
And it's a way of ensuring that when you want to grow your business, you can do it in a much more efficient way.
Absolutely, right? So for instance, to your second point, Deming said it great. He said it best. He said, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. That's it, right? You can sit there and say, I've been doing this for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. And you may have an adversary across the table that says, well, I've been doing it for 31 years. So my answer must be better than yours because I have another year of experience doing this. And you get into this sort of, just headbutting contest. And if you had data, if you had facts to back up your position, that's a very different conversation than I've been doing it for 30 years.
Do you find when you have this type of conversation with a construction company owner, do you find much resistance from them in terms of them saying sort of, well, I know how to run this business. I've done it for 30 years. When you're presenting with them perhaps a more efficient way of running it, do you get much feedback there?
You don't get that at the scale, meaning the larger the organization, the greater the distribution of responsibility, the recognition of this being a problem is well known. Every CEO knows this is a problem. Every contractor I talk to knows they have a problem with this. The question is it a big enough problem to cause you to change what you're doing and actually address it? That's the issue. Is the pain great enough, right? So, for instance, everybody's out there selling themselves. Everybody's out there trying to get work. Oftentimes, as a contractor, you get these calls. Eric, I need a number. I won't hold you to it. Here's my 3-sentence description. Can you tell me what I should do with this?
Right.
And of course, they're going to hold you to it. And of course, here you are now saying, okay, look, can I buy myself some more time? The answer is no. Can I buy more information? The answer is no, because the person requesting it doesn't have more information other than the 3-sentence description. You want to give them a credible enough answer that if they come back to you and say, Eric, let's keep going, you can honor that, as opposed to throwing out something crazy and then coming back and you going, what I told you is not real. And so everybody looks bad. And then they go, Eric is a bozo. I'm not going back to him for this anymore. And you just now lost that opportunity. So you need that history to be able to make that response, but you need it also in a very timely fashion. And the reason I say that is you can't afford to invest an equal amount of time in every inquiry. Everybody who calls isn't real. Some of them are just kicking tires. Some of them are just trying to get second and third numbers. Some of them are real, but you need the ability to respond quickly and without a huge amount of effort in order to then, decide what you want to do with that pursuit.
So let me ask you a question. Do you find that there's much resistance in a company when you're, recommending this data management? Is there ever any resistance in the company from the perspective of, I don't want to share my secrets with the company.
Every estimator has their secret cheat sheet. They do. And every estimator feels that is part of their job security, is part of what makes them unique. And some are really willing to share that, and they have an open mind. I would say the younger generations are much more open to sharing data. The older generation is less inclined to share data. But as a CEO, that's your data. You paid these people to generate this. Think about it, right? You are paying their salaries to generate this data that will help you make great decisions. And if you aren't capturing it, they're going to take it with them when they walk. I guarantee you that.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
How as a CEO, can I manage the differences, the generational differences in terms of perspectives on technology?
Well, it's a matter of deciding whether or not you want to use technology as a means to recruit. First off, I think it's a very important aspect. What I have experienced with younger generations is that they have grown up with technology. These kids have had iPads, at a very young age, in some cases in their, early elementary school, and they're very comfortable with it. And their objective is to pursue an employer that is tech savvy, that is leaning on tech to help them make their decisions. Some of them, frankly, have grown up as we say, praying to the Google God.
Right.
Google is a deity of sorts, and that deity has all the answers just within a fingertip, right? I can just say, asking this thing any question, I get 3 million answers out of this thing. So they are accustomed to information at their fingertips, and they are accustomed to leveraging tech. And if there are two companies that someone is looking at, and one says, here's our paper and pencil, right? We'd like you to break rocks with rocks. And somebody else says, here's our esoteric advanced system that'll get you the information in an instant and allow you more time to analyze rather than search. All of a sudden, that's a very different conversation, because that hiree is looking at one saying, this is going to be a painful experience, and the other one saying, I can really shine here.
Okay, so let's add to our list then.
Yep.
Technology helps me to be more efficient. It helps me to present better to my clients. It helps me to scale my business. It helps me to recruit people.
Yes.
Now, what I'd like you to do for us here is to compare and contrast the old generation with the new generation. Go a little further there, because I think you have a specific way of describing the older generation in terms of the way they relate with their memories.
Well, so it's our observation that, growing up without technology, where you had, textbooks that you lugged around that were, 40 and 50 pounds, which kids still do today, but nevertheless, those textbooks, because you didn't have information directly accessible, on your phone at your fingertips, you actually had to memorize those things.
Yes.
You had to memorize that information. Well, the same thing happened as you developed information with, crude spreadsheets and accounting paper and all that kind of great stuff. You remembered the numbers. You remembered what much it cost to put a footing in place. You remembered how much it cost to put a door in place. You remembered what it cost to put conduit in place. And so you had to remember those things because there was no other place to go. And so all of a sudden, your pursuit of knowledge became tied to your ability to remember these things. And oftentimes, even today, when contractors say we've got great history, what they're saying is we got an old guy in the back that remembers everything.
Right.
And
so it's interesting, though, because then someone's value,
yes,
and even their value to the company and their own esteem is tied to the amount of information that they remember.
Absolutely. Think about it, right? So you get these specialists. We have the specialist who builds parking garages. We have the specialist that really knows schools. We have the specialist that really knows medical office buildings. We have the specialist that knows these kinds of jobs. That's great security for that individual, but that establishes your value and your job security. Contrast that with someone, sorry, go ahead.
No, please, go ahead.
Okay. So contrast that with someone who's young, who's grown up with technology, who's grown up with information at their fingertips, who in some cases no longer is lugging textbooks around. They are not remembering information They are not memorizing information because the information is readily available. And even the curriculum by which they're taught says you can reference this online thing all the way through any test. You don't have to remember these things. And therefore, if I don't have to remember something, I purge it because it's readily available, right? And to prove my point, let me ask you, Eric, how many phone numbers do you remember now?
Right.
You don't, right? Because they're on your phone. It's information at your fingertips. So if you've grown up with this idea that I can just reach into this magic box, whatever it is, pray to the Google God and get the answer that I need, I don't retain information anymore because it's always available 24/7 at an instant. That's a huge contrast to the older generation that had to memorize everything.
So as a leader, as the CEO,
yeah,
it seems like I have to have a new way of looking at things, because we esteem the people who have the information in their heads, but the way the younger generation is coming up, that sense of esteem is no longer there because it's right here in my hand. I don't need it in my head if it's right here in my hand on my phone.
And it's compounded with the transient nature of our work. And what do I mean by that? Forbes runs these surveys every few years, right? So the average person stays at a job about every 4.6 years, right? Plus or minus, whatever it is. So
right.
I'm going to stay with this employer for just about 5 years, right? If I'm young, I stay around 3 years. What happens to that experience when I walk out the door? We no longer have these lifers that sit around for 20 and 30 and 40 years doing the same thing with the same company. When that happens, all that history is readily available. It's Joe, it's Sally, it's Bob, whoever that is, that's your historical database because they've been there forever and they've been around forever and they're not going anywhere. People you're hiring today, they're going to be gone in 3 years, right? If they're below 35, trust me, they're going to be gone in 3 years. All of that history, all that knowledge, all that investment's going to walk out the door.
And let me ask you this,
let
me ask you this, just about that.
Yeah.
In your experience, the companies that are more savvy with tech and therefore have this information readily available and are interacting with the younger generations in a way that appeals to them.
Yes.
Is there any difference there in terms of their ability to retain those folks just from your anecdotal experience?
From the standpoint of having the technology and the data that supports the decision-making process, that is a much more attractive place to be than the place that doesn't have that. And here's why. Everybody is overloaded with work, right? We all take on, our plates runneth over all the time, and more comes piling on when we don't want it. And so our ability to execute, right, is directly tied to our satisfaction, to our esteem, to how we are viewed by our peers and our managers and so forth. And if I'm in an environment where I have to reinvent everything, I'm not going to be anywhere as efficient as if I have all the information that I think I need, or most of it. And now I can execute on analytics. I can look at risk. I can look at all kinds of things that are much more important than having to go out and generate that information again. Right. So we shift from a information gathering exercise to an analytics exercise. And that's where, the younger generation has done well. They have become accustomed to data. So they're not afraid of data. They expect data, they demand data, and they know what to do with it usually.
So that's interesting. So let's add to our list the benefit of technology rightly implemented being that you protect yourself against the transient nature of the workforce by capturing that data.
It's a knowledge management play, and it's never been more important simply because the transient nature of the work.
Okay, so let's dive a little deeper here. Okay. Let's say I'm a contractor and I do have that treasure trove of gold, but I'm tossing it away on a regular basis. How can a contractor begin to overcome that particular struggle with data management?
You got to make it a priority. I mean, that's what it comes down to, is that it has to be something important enough that you're willing to address it through resources, that you're willing to carve out some of your overhead budget to task someone with leading an initiative to try to help you get there.
Okay, so let me interrupt you. So this is really important.
Yeah.
Who do I task?
It's a great question. There's a balance between what I would describe as someone who knows the business versus someone who knows technology.
Okay.
And it's right now, because there are so many ways to get there technically, your focus should be on who knows the business and who knows where to focus the attention of that business. Meaning, where in my business do I gain the most by having historical information? Where do I need that the most? And it's there that you can focus your attention and say, look, I've got a really important person here. They run all kinds of jobs and all kinds of things. They know the business the best. And I need to take 15% of that person's time, 20% of that person's time for the next 3 months. And I want them to focus on those areas of attention. And I'm willing to take that financial hit because I need that person's, capabilities to help me put a plan together.
Okay, so let me explore this a little further. Okay, so construction, I always think of it, I've got to get the work, I've got to plan the work, I got to build the work, and then I got to build the work, right?
Yes.
So when it comes to beginning the technology journey, in your experience, where do most contractors focus, or where should they focus?
So you need to get the back half of the house right. And what I mean by that is you need to have your financial house in order first and foremost. If you don't have your financial house in order, you don't know where the money's going. You don't know who you got to pay. You don't know who's paid you and all that kind of thing. You've got to get that dialed in first and have the foundation that I can run the business with confidence, and I can see where the money's coming in and I can see where the money's going out and all of that. You solve that problem, and typically that's something that most contractors solve first. Then they tend to focus on the project management side.
Right.
Then they focus on pre-construction last. That's typically the order that we see. And
yeah, go ahead.
And a lot of that is predicated on personnel. In essence, if you look at a larger contractor or a medium-sized contractor, they're going to have a lot more project managers and a lot more people in finance than they will in pre-construction. You can get by with one estimator up to a certain volume, maybe you can get 2 and 3 and all that kind of thing, where you need PMs everywhere to run these jobs. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to execute, and you need accountants and finance people to make sure everybody gets paid and you get paid and all that. So that's the successive order.
If I'm starting on the back end, then I'm the CEO, I'm the president.
Yeah.
How much time should I be investing in that? Because shouldn't I have a really good grasp on the numbers myself?
If you have a sound financial system, if your financial system is giving you those numbers, and if you know what numbers to be looking at, right? In essence, you're going to ultimately find that with enough data, you're going to start to see patterns in the data, and those patterns should help you develop key metrics that help you run your business. What are the flashpoints? What are the tall trees, if you will, that matter to me for my particular business? Having enough data will let you see those patterns, let you develop those metrics, those ratios, and have a quick idea of today, where am I financially? Do I have enough cash on hand? How much is coming in? How fast is it going out? Just those kinds of things. Key business drivers, you need to have that in place as a CEO to operate the business effectively.
So let's just explore that a little bit more. In your experience, regardless of where a contractor may take the initiative to implement technology, what are the biggest struggles that they have when they see they need to do it? Yep. They've got the pain, they've got the motivation, they start on the path, and they immediately stub their toes. Why? Why does that happen?
Oftentimes it's planning, lack of planning more than anything else. Just sort of a classic, initiative that it wasn't thought through very well. Oftentimes people get sucked into the vendor shiny silver object pitch, right?
What does that mean?
They see the video, they see the demo, they look at that, and they get these, aspirations and expectations in their head. And the CEO comes in Monday morning and he's pounding the table. He's like, we got to do this. And everybody says, okay, let's stop what we're doing and go try to figure this thing out. And they do something they shouldn't, and they line up 3 different vendor solutions, and they look across the checklist of features, and they do that kind of thing, and they pick the one that has the most check marks on it, and they try it. and it just fails miserably.
So what's the alternative approach there? If I'm the CEO, give me some advice. What should I be doing instead of that approach?
Focus on the area that matters the most, right? One that you can make the most impact upon.
Yep.
Find the person that knows the business that you can carve out their time to help go off and try to put a fence around this, but come up with a plan.
Yes.
Prototype. Small iterative iterations, prototype using really cheap tools like Microsoft Excel. Excel is an ideal tool for prototyping, data analysis, for prototyping, development of data standards. And it's cheap. You already have it, I'm sure. There's just all ways to do that. Figure out how the data needs to come together before you determine the tool that you need to support that. People sometimes jump ahead and they buy the tool thinking the tool is going to solve all the problems. You got to know what you're trying to solve. What problem are you trying to solve? If I just go out there and buy a skill saw and the problem I have is, putting in screws, I didn't do so good.
So that problem identification, is that the first thing, would you say, to identify the problem?
Yeah. You want to focus on the areas that matter most to the business. That's where you start. Where can we take advantage of data for purposes of whatever, right? Is it I'm trying to get better at the front end of the process? Am I trying to sell more work? If I'm trying to sell more work, then I need to look the part. I need to have data available. I need to be able to respond to opportunities quickly. I need to be able to validate what I'm coming up with. That whole sanity check. So I just hired somebody that claimed to be a great estimator, and they came up with this number. Is that a good number? As a CEO, I have no idea. But if I had data, I could look at that and say, hey, that number we just cooked up, it looks so different than our experience. What are we thinking, right? Did we fat finger something? Did we miss it by a mile? Or did the designer develop some esoteric interior mahogany across the world design that's going to blow the budget? Why is this thing, where it is? Data is the only way you have to support that.
Okay, so let me just go through that real quick. A good implementation, and this is interesting because the phrase that popped into my mind is go slow to go fast. Yep. You've got to start slow, not fast. And so you've got to resist, and you've got to resist the pitch of the sales guys.
Yep. So that temptation. Yep.
You identify the need, or you identify the problem that you want to solve. You find the person internally who you'll be able to give that responsibility to.
Yep.
You prototype with a simple tool. I found that really good. Just prototype.
Yep.
And then you figure out how the data needs to come together in order to be usable to solve the problem.
Yep. And then you can look for technology vendors that support the thing that you're trying to accomplish, and not get sucked into their pitch, but have them meet your requirements. Okay, knowing what you need is far more important than having them, pitch you on what they have.
Okay, so I just want to say this: what Nick has just shared with us can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of heartache if you will just listen to those 4 simple steps. Okay, that is solid gold right there, Nick. I appreciate that. Let me just explore it a little bit further here. What if I'm a CEO and I'm not really sure what my greatest need is? Does that ever happen, or do you tend to see that people know what their need is?
They typically know. The problem is more along the lines of, where do we prioritize? Right. Where can we actually make a dent in this thing? Where are we on our maturation process? Is this a new thing that we're figuring out, or has this thing been harping on us for the last year, 10 years, 5 years, whatever it is? That they know. If a CEO is paying attention, they know where they can do better. Okay, so it's interesting because again, perhaps the step before articulating the problem is prioritizing the problems that you have and then picking one. Sure. And being disciplined enough to go through. Now, but what's interesting, see, this is the thing, and in the construction world, there's like a million software solutions coming from all different angles. Obviously, construction is so complex. What if I'm the construction CEO who says, I just want one thing? Is that one thing out there, or are you just saying, I'm sorry, man, the one thing is not there. You just need to deal with reality? The one thing is absolutely, positively not there. It is a very fragmented process, as you know, in construction, right? It isn't something that is manufacturing based, that's so repeatable, that makes it so easy. There isn't one dominant player, right? If you said, we need to figure out the best search engine,
Right.
I can sort of point you in that direction today, right? Because that game's somewhat over. So, but you don't have that in construction. And in fact, with the investments that have occurred in the last few years, you're going to see a deluge. If you think you have a lot of construction tech right now, you're going to see a ton more construction tech coming at you in the coming years, because somebody has woken up to the opportunity of what construction brings and what it looks like to the whole GDP of the country. And so the investment bankers or VCs are here in strength, investing billions every year in construction startups. So they're going to produce some pretty great things. And, construction or technology is a river. It's always flowing.
Right.
It's always flowing. The question is, how fast is this thing flowing, and where do you want to get on? But it's coming.
So let me ask you this then. Let's say I'm a construction CEO. I've made a significant investment in technology for whatever part of the business, whether it was a grand scale, micro scale, and it hasn't worked. What do I do then?
You're not alone.
Yeah.
There's just a ton of dead bodies out there, and even tech that we've deployed for various reasons, it just doesn't work. And there are lots of reasons why tech doesn't work, and there are lots of surveys out there that will point to failures and reasons for failures and all that kind of thing. I would suggest that most of it stems from lack of planning. It really stems from putting the cart before the horse, not really thinking through what they want to do, not prioritizing it well enough, taking on too much. We use an interesting analogy here. It's kind of like a rock climber, right? A rock climber only moves one pivot point, right? One touch point at a time. They don't move both feet at the same time. They don't move all, their hands at the same time. They lock into 3 points and they move 1 point. Well, if you try to move too much, right, from a standpoint of a CEO, you try to take on too much, you'll fail. The rock climber falls off the face of the mountain.
Right.
You want to be, cognizant of how much change you can take on at any one time. And every single culture has that balance of change. There are plenty of places we've gotten to where there are ripping and replacing all kinds of systems. And the human mind can only take so many sort of balls in the air at the same time. And then they start sort of just, eyes sort of glaze over and smoke comes out of their ears. And so you don't want to take on too much change. You want to, make a move, implement that move, get it successful, and then go on to the next move.
Excellent.
And we see contractors fail all the time because they've taken on too much. They are, as we say, trying to boil the ocean.
Interesting. So go slow to go fast, start small, have a clear problem that you want to solve. I think if you've done the implementation and it's not working, then you need to do a better job of planning, from what I've heard, from what I'm hearing from you. Yep. That's the first thing to think about. How well have we planned it out? I guess it's really tough though, because you spend a bunch of money and you have hopes and expectations. It's tough to kind of humble yourself and say this is not doing what it needs to do.
Well, and if you start small, if you don't, for instance, here's a bit of advice. When you're looking at a technology, don't buy every license that you think you might need. Buy a couple of licenses, prove it that it works, and then scale up the licenses. Some of this tech will take 6 months to a year to actually get it dialed in the way you want. If anybody of scale has implemented, say, a financial system, that does not happen overnight. That takes many months, in some cases years, to ultimately get there. Well, until that happens, you're using the old system. Why did you just buy 50 or 100 licenses of something that you're not going to actually use for another year? Right? So buy the 2 or 3 or 5 licenses, figure out what that minimal viable initiative is going to be, hold off on the investment, because if you do end up at the end of that early stage going, we chose the wrong horse, your investment is far more contained than having bought every single license under the sun that you now have to eat.
That's another nugget right there, guys. Man, I tell you, that is a good one. It's almost like, just to analogize it to building a construction company, when you start out with a new client, sometimes you just take on a small job so that you can prove yourself, you can begin to build a relationship. You don't take on this massive job where you're putting yourself at risk.
It's way too risky, right? Hold hands before you date. How's that?
Very good. That's right. I really like that. So where are the areas where technology is insufficient, do you think? Where perhaps it's trumpeted to solve problems, and yet it's not really designed to solve those types of problems?
Well, the big one, I would say, the broad one is AI. I think there's just a whole bunch of noise around artificial intelligence that gets hyped up that people don't really quite understand. And that's a whole other conversation. In construction specifically, it's BIM, it's building information modeling.
Okay.
It is the digital representation of a potential project versus the physical construction of the project.
Okay.
Theory being, if you can build it, right, in a three-dimensional world, and you can resolve any of the conflicts, you can figure out where everything goes, you can figure out how you're going to get everything in place, you can figure out how you're going to maintain it in the future, you can figure out what the sequence of construction is going to be, you can figure out how much you've got and what those things cost. If you can do all that virtually, when you get into the actual construction process, it's all going to go swimmingly. And there are tons of cases where that works, and there are tons of cases where BIM is incredibly valuable. It's proven itself, over the last year. Where the misconception is that just because I'm using BIM, all this sort of magically happens. It's like, it's just going to happen because I'm using BIM. And that's just not the case. This is just another approach, right, that requires discipline. It requires standards. It requires quality control. We see this all the time where for design firms that are using this BIM technology, two modelers separated by a portable 4-foot partition are producing radically different results. Same tool, same office, right? They're just literally, a few feet away from each other, completely different output. And
why is that?
So it's just a function that people think that because they use BIM, all this sort of magic just automatically occurs, and it just simply doesn't.
And so is that because of the human element that still must interface with what's created in the virtual world?
Yes, absolutely. There's just so much that goes into it, and you have so much latitude into how you develop these things and how you put things together. And people do crazy things in BIM, and because it's supposed to be automated, the downstream systems that read the model don't know what to do with the information because it makes no sense, and it just is an inefficient process. And what happens is the misjudgment of what the technology will bring you in terms of value.
Okay.
And the CEO sees this in a video. They go to a seminar. They go, God, we got to be doing this, pounding the table Monday morning. We got to do BIM, and they just don't know why, but they know it's going to help them. And now it's up to everybody else to figure out, okay, what do we do?
So it's interesting because the CEO has got to resist the pitch, so to speak, and begin with the problems that we are experiencing.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so let me ask you this. We've talked about the impact of technology in a construction company. What kind of impact does it have in terms of increasing the value of the business? So let's say I've been in the business for a while. I'm thinking, I've got a 5 to 10 year window where perhaps I want to exit, sell the company. Is technology going to help me in terms of the valuation of the business?
Well, technology will help you because it will reflect upon the operational efficiency of the business itself. A lot of times you'll see buyers of businesses look at an opportunity and go, this is a damn good company, except they're broken over here. And if I can replace the systems or maybe some of the people over here or whatever it is, I could, get a great return on my investment. In essence, this company really knows how to execute work, but they're horrible at predicting the cost of work. So if I could increase the accuracy of those predictions, I could have much more predictable outcomes, and therefore I could really make some hay with this organization. Or vice versa. They're great at prediction, but horrible at execution. That kind of a thing. So
go ahead, please.
Yeah, that really helps. Technology itself. Data helps quite a bit in the sense that data makes the organization transparent. And so what I mean by that is, think of you being the buyer. You're going to buy this construction company. Is it opaque? Do I know what's really happening? Right? And if it's opaque, I'm going to put a lower valuation because now I have higher risk, right? Versus it being transparent. They have all the data, they have operational tools. I can go in and ask the right questions and get the answers that I need to make a decision about whether or not this is a good investment.
See, now dude, I mean, check this out. So a lot of people complain that a construction company isn't valuable at the end of the day because it's all based on relationships and the knowledge of the people who are in the business. And this is another way of getting that knowledge out into an accessible format, so that obviously produces a value that is tangible to someone who's purchasing the business.
Yes, we like to say, turn your historical data into a strategic corporate asset.
A strategic corporate asset. So that's a good question for you to ask yourself. Is your data currently a strategic corporate asset?
Great question. Yep.
Okay, so let's sum up here. I'm the construction CEO. I'm listening to this episode. I've got lots of insights. My mind is going ding, 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 ding.
Yep.
I'm trying to resist the temptation of banging on tables and implementing the world-changing magic pill. What are 3 action items I can take from our conversation to begin the journey of implementing technology in an effective way in my company?
Like we said, identify where the greatest problems and the greatest opportunities are for change, right? Find the person internally that's going to lead that. They may be the best person internally to lead it, but they may also recognize that they don't have the knowledge they need to actually put a plan together. So they can go lean on external parties to help them put that plan together. Those people are out there, those consultants are out there to help them do that. And then once they've got a plan in place, start to prototype. Start small, take a chunk, make it take an agile approach, an adjustable approach that allows you to make a step in one direction. And if it's the wrong step, it's a very cheap step to take, right? So it's just like course correcting on a map, right? If you don't check the map, but once a day, you could be a whole day off of your path, right? Yes. But if you check every hour, well, you're only an hour away from where you need to be. And if you check every minute, you're only a minute away from where you need to be. So you take this agile approach to the problem solving. You don't take huge, boil the ocean initiatives. You start with agile and digestible chunks, and you make progress that way in a predictable way.
Excellent. So I just want to summarize. We've talked about the process, and we've also talked about the benefits. The benefits of good technology implementation being that you make yourself more credible with your clients, you make accessing information more efficient.
Yep.
You make attracting talent to your company, especially younger people, something that is easier to do.
Yes.
You mitigate against the transient nature of talent by getting that data, and you increase the value of your organization for potential purchasers in terms of being able to capture that data and present it as a strategic asset to someone who might be looking at your organization.
Absolutely. Well done, Eric.
Excellent. I tell you, Nick, this is some great value. What I'd like you to do, please tell us a little bit about EOS Group. What are you guys all about?
So we're focused on the pre-construction process. We are a professional services firm. About 60% of the organization is services. We hire engineers, estimators, project managers that know the domain. And then the other part of the company, the 40% or so, is software developers. And we build technology, we develop data. And so we specialize in the front end of the process. We stop where the shovel hits the dirt. But prior to that, we help companies become operationally efficient in that front end of the process. And, no matter what you do from an execution standpoint, if you don't set up the job right for success, if you don't establish the right budget that's realistic, that is attainable, it doesn't matter how well you execute, right? So if you're off by $1 million, you've got to eat that million or get it back some other way because you missed it on the front end. So getting right on the front end is what we're about.
So if someone's listening to this podcast, who should contact you if they're interested in learning more? What's the pain they have, and who should be contacting you?
So the information you can get on our website, eosgroup.com, real simple. Usually it is somebody from the leadership side of the business, and typically out of the front end of the process, a pre-construction manager, an estimating director, someone like that, or a CEO for a smaller company that says, I've got to get better at this part of the business, and we can point them in the right direction. If we can't help them, we'll point them to the place that can.
Excellent. I'm seeing here that you've worked with 77% of ENR's top 400 firms.
Yeah, over the 25 years we have. Yeah,
that's terrific. Now I'm looking at your background here, Nick. You've got the is that Santa Barbara there?
This is Santa Barbara.
I knew that. I knew you were from Santa Barbara. Yeah, so tell me. Okay, so I'm visiting Santa Barbara. Let's say I'm doing that. What is the one restaurant I need to hit in Santa Barbara?
Well, I'm not sure which ones are still open.
Yeah, right.
So you gotta be careful there. But I've always enjoyed spending time at the Blue Agave. It's downtown, or it was downtown. I haven't been there in a while, so I don't know. But there are a ton of great restaurants in Santa Barbara. Italian food, Olio and Limoni in Upper State is a great place, and they have both a great pizza side of the house, and then they have a great, authentic Italian side of the house. So Olio and Limoni would be one of my favorites there. Okay, so we're going to find that one. Say that one again slowly. Olio and Limoni. It's oil and lemon, right? In Italian. Okay. Olio and Limoni. Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll check that out. Okay. Excellent. Yeah, well, I really appreciate it. That's awesome. Nick, I appreciate your generosity here today. Again, we're going to link in the show notes to how you can get a hold of Nick if you'd like to. And I tell you, many great insights here today, Nick. Thank you so much for joining us today on Construction Genius. Eric, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much as well. Right on. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity, and to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.